My name is Clara, and I just buried my grandfather, Arthur, the only man who ever truly loved me. Now, just 3 days later, my aunt and uncle, Brenda and Mark, the people who raised me, are demanding I sign a loan against the bakery he left me. This bakery is my entire life and my livelihood. They want me to hand over $50,000 to pay my cousin Leo's gambling debt. I am completely helpless, in a move I once thought was kind. My grandfather made them co-signers on the business account for emergencies. Now, they have the power to freeze every penny I have. Their motive is simple: to save their golden child, Leo. Yet again, no matter the cost to me, but they made a fatal mistake. They assumed my grandfather Arthur was a fool. They forgot that he saw everything, and he never, ever left anything to chance. The bell above the old wooden door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt wrong in the heavy silence of the evening. I finished wiping down the last stainless steel counter of Arthur's pantry, my muscles aching from a 14-hour day. The bakery was quiet now, the ovens finally cool. The scent of cooling sourdough and sweet cinnamon lingered in the air, a fragrance that was usually my greatest comfort. Tonight, it just made me feel hollow. My eyes drifted to the small, gold-framed photo on the wall by the register. It was grandfather Arthur, taken just last year, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way. They always did. His large hands covered in flour. I could almost hear his voice, deep and gentle, rumbling in his chest. The secret's in the hands. Clara, you have to feel the dough. Listen to what it needs. He had placed his large, warm hand over mine when I was just 6 years old, teaching me how to knead, how to fold, how to be patient. He hadn't just left me a building full of ovens and flour. He'd left me his heart, his entire legacy. And I was so very tired. The funeral had been a blur of dark suits and hushed voices. But this crushing quiet was worse. The emptiness felt like a physical weight in the room. The bell chimed again, louder this time. It wasn't a customer. The closed sign had been turned for an hour. It was my Aunt Brenda and Uncle Mark. They stood by the door, not bothering to wipe their feet on the mat, letting the cold night air rush in. Brenda clutched her expensive leather purse to her chest, and Mark had that tight-lipped, impatient look he always got before a storm. They hadn't called. They hadn't stopped by all day to ask how I was coping. "You're still working," Mark stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, flat and cold, as the air they'd let in. "The bread doesn't wait for grief, Uncle Mark," I replied, my voice horsey. I wrung out the damp cloth and hung it up, keeping my back to them. I didn't want to face them. I didn't feel I had the strength for it. "We need to talk," Brenda said, her voice unusually high and thin. She walked forward, her heels clicking loudly on the worn wooden floor that Arthur had sanded and stained himself 2 decades ago. I turned around slowly, pulling at the strings of my flour-dusted apron. "Okay, what's wrong now?" Mark moved past her, all restless energy, and placed a thick sheaf of papers directly on the clean counter. He slapped it down right on top of the glass display case, making me flinch. I saw the official logo of the town's biggest bank at the top. "What is this?" I asked, though a cold dread was already creeping up my spine, tightening my stomach. "It's a loan application," Mark said. He tapped the top page with a thick finger. $50,000. "We're leveraging the bakery. We need you to sign it. Tonight." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the papers, then at their hard, expectant faces. $50,000. The number echoed in the empty room, sounding obscene. "No," I whispered. My voice was so quiet I wasn't sure I'd said it. I cleared my throat and tried again. Stronger this time. "Absolutely not." I put my hand on the packet and pushed it back toward him. "This is Arthur's bakery. This is my home. I am not signing it over just because Leo got himself into another mess." Brenda's face crumpled instantly. The tears came, right on cue, as if she'd been holding them just behind her eyes. "Clara, You don't understand, she wailed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief she'd had ready in her hand. He's in terrible trouble. These people, they're dangerous. They said they'll hurt him. He's my baby. Clara, our only son. My stomach turned over with a bitter life. Familiar acid. Your baby is 28 years old. Aunt Brenda, when does it stop? When do you stop letting him ruin his life and try to ruin mine? I took a ragged breath, the injustice of it all choking me. What about the cars? The 2 cars you co-signed for that got repossessed? What about the college tuition you paid for? For classes he never even showed up to. Now this gambling. I had a sudden, sharp memory that felt like swallowing glass. Me, 14 years old, standing on a step stool at 4 a.m, my arms aching as I tried to wrangle a 50-pound bag of flour into the industrial mixer before school. That same afternoon, I watched from the bakery window as Leo, 16, drove by in the brand new sports car my aunt and uncle had bought him for his birthday. I had worked here every weekend, every summer, every holiday since I was old enough to see over the counter. They always told me it was building character. They told me my small paycheck was my contribution to the household. But Leo's recklessness, his constant failures, that was just boys being boys. And it was always funded without question. That's enough. Mark's voice cut through the air, sharp as a cleaver. He wasn't crying. His eyes were like chips of ice. You think you have a choice? Girl. You think just because the old man left you the keys? You're in charge. He stepped closer, leaning over the counter, invading my space. He smiled, a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes and made my skin crawl. He was a sentimental old fool. He thought he was protecting you. He put our names on the business account right alongside yours. In case of emergency, he said. Well, this is an emergency. Clara. My blood ran cold. I had forgotten that Arthur had done it years ago. When I first started managing the books full-time, he'd said it was just a formality, a protection, in case something happened to me, so they could step in and keep the business running. I had thought it was a sign of trust, of family. I never imagined they would use it against me. You wouldn't. I breathed, the words catching in my throat. Watch me, Mark said, his voice dropping to a low growl. You don't sign these papers by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Brenda and I are going straight to the bank. We will freeze the account. Every last dollar. Your payroll for Sarah and Tom. It won't clear. The bulk flour delivery you have coming on Friday. It'll be sent right back. You'll be ruined. Clara. Utterly ruined. In less than a week. This whole place. He waved his hand around the bakery, his gesture full of contempt. Will be shuttered. All because you were too selfish to help your family. I stood frozen. I couldn't move. My hands, resting on the counter, clenched into fists, so tight my nails dug painful crescents into my palms. I could feel the hot, angry sting of tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. I bit my bottom lip hard, tasting the metallic tang of blood. They had me. They had planned this. They had waited until Arthur was gone, until I was alone and grieving. They had me, and they knew it. They were using my grandfather's love as a weapon to destroy everything he had built. He trusted you, I said, my voice shaking with a rage that was so cold it burned. He took you both in when you had nothing. He raised me for you. And this is how you repay him. He owed us that. Brenda sniffled, stuffing her handkerchief away. The performance over. Just sign it. Dear, it's for the best. You know what family does? Family helps family. They turned and walked out, their backs straight, their mission accomplished. The bell chimed again. A final, mocking sound in the crushing silence. I was left alone, surrounded by the scent of bread, with the loan papers sitting on my counter like a death warrant. The full, suffocating weight of their betrayal settled on me, pushing the air from my lungs. They were right. I was trapped. For a long time after the bell chimed, I just stood there, my hand flat on the cold glass of the display case. The papers sat in front of me, a white rectangle of betrayal. My breathing was shallow, coming in short. Sharp puffs. $50,000. Freeze the accounts. The words just kept spinning in my head. Adidzing. Sick rotation. I looked around the bakery. My bakery. And suddenly it felt like a stranger's parapet. The big mixers in the back. The cooling racks waiting for the morning's loaves. The worn counter I was leaning on, they could all be gone. In a week. My hands started to tremble. Then my whole arm. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over me. Payroll. Sarah. Tom. They had families. They were counting on their paychecks this Friday. And the delivery. My supplier. Old Mr. Henderson. He trusted me. He gave me terms based on Arthur's handshake. If I couldn't pay him, my reputation, Arthur's reputation, would be shattered. This wasn't just about money. It was about honor. It was about everything my grandfather had spent his life building. I fumbled for my phone in my apron pocket, my fingers feeling thick and uncooperative. I hit the speed dial for Sarah. She was my best friend, my rock, the only person besides Arthur who knew my whole story. She worked managing a small coffee shop across town, and she picked up on the third ring, her voice cheerful. Arthur's Pantry, home of the best cinnamon buns in the state. She chirped. Don't tell me you're calling to brag about tomorrow's batch. One word. Sarah. Was all I could get out. It came out as a strangled sob. A sound that broke the dam I had been holding back. The hot tears finally came. Spilling over. Tasting of salt and flour. I sank onto the little stool behind the counter, my head in my hands. The phone pressed hard against my ear. Clara, Clara. What is it? What's wrong? Her voice was instantly sharp with concern. All traces of teasing gone. Through my gasping breaths, I told her everything. The visit. The loan papers. The gambling debt. The $50,000. And the final, terrible threat. The cosigner card. The frozen accounts. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was not soft. It was a low, angry hiss. Those leech. They waited. They waited until he was gone. The cowards. Of course they did. She cursed. A sharp, unladylike word that made me almost smile through my tears. Okay, she said, her voice. All business now. First thing, you are not alone in this. You hear me. If they lock you out of your apartment above the shop, you come to mine. The pull-out sofa is yours for as long as you need. We'll figure this out. We will. How? Sarah, I whispered, wiping my nose on my sleeve. He's right. Legally. He's right. They're on the account. They can do it. They'll bleed me dry and walk away. You don't know that for sure, she insisted, though her voice wavered a little. You need a lawyer. Clara. Not just a friend. You need someone who knows the law. Wasn't there someone Arthur always used, that older gentleman downtown? Her words cut through the fog of my panic. Mr. Harrison, I said, sitting up a little straighter. Harrison and Associates. Arthur always said he was an honest man who read the fine print. Call him, Sarah ordered. Call him first thing in the morning. Be on his doorstep when he opens. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to them. Don't even answer their texts. Just call Mr. Anyone. Harrison. We hung up, and I felt a tiny, fragile spark of something. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was just fight. The panic was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But now it had a new companion, a deep, simmering rage that felt like it was boiling my blood. They would not take this from me. They would not dishonor his memory. Not while I was still breathing. The next morning, I was outside Mr. Harrison's office at 7:55 a.m. The old, frosted glass on the door rattled when I opened it. The office was exactly as I'd imagined, full of dark wood, towering shelves of leather-bound books that smelled like dust and old paper, and a faint, comforting scent of pipe tobacco. Just like Arthur's study, Mr. Harrison himself was a small, neat man in his late 60s, with a kind face and sharp, intelligent eyes behind round glasses. He remembered my grandfather instantly, and his smile was warm. "Clara, Arthur's girl," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "He was so proud of you. Called you his master baker. I'm so sorry for your loss. My dear. Now, what's this trouble your aunt and uncle are stirring up?" I sat in the stiff leather chair opposite his massive desk and laid it all out, just as I had for Sarah. I pushed the loan papers across the desk. I told him about the bank account. His expression grew more and more grave as I spoke, his fingers steepling under his chin. He listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute. He picked up the phone. "Mary," he said to his assistant, "get me Frank at Community Trust Bank." "Yes." "The branch manager." He covered the receiver and looked at me. "You bank with Community Trust." "Correct, Arthur's business account." I nodded, stunned at his quickness. He spoke into the phone, his voice suddenly all authority. "Frank, it's Jim Harrison. I have Clara, Arthur's granddaughter, in my office. I need you to confirm the signers on the Arthur's Pantry main business account." "Yes, I'll hold." He held, humming quietly, while I felt like my heart was going to pound its way out of my chest. "Yes, Frank. I see." And they were added. "I understand. Thank you." He hung up the phone and gave me a deep, sad sigh. My stomach plunged. "It's just as you feared. Miss Clara, your aunt and uncle were added as full co-signers with rights of survivorship in 2015. As far as the bank is concerned, their authority on that account is equal to yours. They can, in fact, freeze the funds. They can, in fact, withdraw them." I felt the last bit of fight drain out of me, leaving me as empty as the bakery last night. "So that's it," I said, my voice flat. "I have to sign the papers. I have to give them the money." "It's a very bad situation," he said gently. "A very common one when families mix business and personal feelings. They can drain that account. And it's perfectly legal. Your only recourse would be to sue them for the funds. A long, expensive, and difficult civil process. By then," he finished, his eyes full of pity, "your business would be long gone. They have you in a terrible bind." I just nodded, unable to speak. I clenched my fists in my lap, my nails digging in again. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. I had failed. I had failed Arthur. "Mr. Harrison leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. He looked at me over the tops of his glasses. "But, Miss Clara," he said, his voice dropping low. "I knew Arthur for 35 years. He was a sentimental man. Yes, but he was no fool. He was one of the sharpest men I've ever had the pleasure of doing business with. Are you absolutely certain that this signature card is the final word on the matter?" I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, tapping his pen on his desk blotter. "Arthur was a man of contracts, of agreements. He loved his I's dotted and his T's crossed. Are you sure he didn't draw up some other document, some private agreement between himself and your aunt and uncle regarding their role? A contract that perhaps outlines the specifics of that emergency they're claiming. If you could find such a document, it would change this entire conversation from a bank matter to a contract dispute. And that," he smiled a thin, lawyerly smile, "is a very different animal." A tiny spark lit again, deep inside me. A document. An agreement. It was possible. It was so. "Arthur," I left the lawyer's office in a daze. The what if was buzzing in my head like a bee in a jar. I didn't go back to the bakery's main floor. I used my key to go up the back stairs to the small apartment above the shop where I lived. But I walked right past my door. I went to the end of the hall, to the door that had remained closed for the past week. Arthur's study. I pushed it open. The air was still, and it smelled of him, that familiar, comforting scent of old books, sweet pipe tobacco, and just a hint of the vanilla he always added to his morning coffee. His big, overstuffed leather chair sat in the corner, a book still resting on the side table, open to the page he'd been reading. This was his sanctuary. My heart ached. But Mr. Harrison's words echoed in my ears. A different animal. I started my search. I was methodical, just as Arthur had taught me to be when taking inventory. I started with the tall, dark wood file cabinet. The top drawer was labeled Taxes. I pulled it open. It was perfectly organized, with files for every year going back to 1995, just taxes. The second drawer, Vendors, full of invoices for flour, sugar, yeast, chocolate. Some were from companies that probably didn't even exist anymore. I spent an hour pulling out file after file. Nothing. The third drawer, Bank. My hands trembled. This was it. I pulled it open. It was full of old bank statements, loan documents for the original oven, the mortgage papers for the building, which had a big, red paid in full stamped on it. I felt a swell of pride. And then I found the file labeled Business Accounts. I pulled it out. Inside was a copy of the signature card, the one adding Brenda and Mark. And that was it. Just the card. Nothing else. I felt sick. I checked the last drawer. Personal. But it was just old birthday cards I'd given him. A few photos. And his honorable discharge papers from the army. Nothing. I moved to his desk. A massive, heavy piece of oak that took up half the room. I opened every drawer. Old pens that had run out of ink. Stamps. Paper clips. Empty notepads. A half-eaten roll of mints. More receipts. Nothing. I finally sank into his big leather chair, the leather sighing under my weight. I was exhausted. Defeated. Mr. Harrison was wrong. Arthur had made a mistake. A single, terrible mistake. And he had trusted the wrong people. I was going to lose everything. I put my head in my hands and let out a long, shaky breath. As I sat there, my hand rested on the arm of the chair. My other hand drifted to the desk, my fingers tracing the deep grain of the oak. I remembered scratching that very spot with a toy car when I was little, and how Arthur hadn't been angry. He had just laughed and said it gave it character. I ran my hand over the smooth, worn wood, and a memory surfaced, as clear as the morning bell. I was about 8, and I'd been helping him file papers. I'd asked him where he kept his real treasures. I meant money, orievels, like in my storybooks. He had tapped the side of his head, then his heart. Then he had tapped the big, heavy desk. The most valuable things. Clara Bean, he'd said, his eyes twinkling, are never kept out in the open. You have to protect them. People can be complicated. You always need a safe place for the things that matter. My head snapped up. A safe place. I looked at the desk. It was just a desk. But then I looked under it. I got down on my hands and knees on the dusty floor of the study. The old floorboards were dark and cool under my palms. I looked under the heavy oak desk, into the shadows, and I remembered. It was a rainy Saturday. I must have been 8 or 9 years old, bored and bothering him while he tried to do his taxes. He had laughed, pulled me onto his lap, and pointed under the desk. You see that plank? Clara Bean. The third one from the left. That's the secret one. That's where the old baker who built this place used to hide his treasure from pirates. I had giggled. There are no pirates in Ohio. Grandpa. He had tapped the side of his nose. But there are always pirates. My girl. They just wear different hats. My breath caught in my chest. I scrambled back to the desk, my heart thumping a heavy, painful beat against my ribs. I ran my fingers over the planks. 1, 2, 3. The third plank. I pushed on it. Nothing. He pushed harder. It felt solid. My hope sank. Was it just a story? A game? No. I remembered him showing me. I ran my fingers along the thin crack between the boards. And I felt it. A tiny, almost invisible indentation in the wood. A finger pull. I dug my nails into it and pulled. The plank didn't budge. I ran back to the desk drawers, grabbing the heavy-duty metal letter opener I'd seen earlier. I jammed the tip into the crack and pried, putting all my weight into it. The old wood groaned in protest, a sound like a pained breath. He pushed harder, and with a sharp, dusty crack, the plank popped loose. I tossed the letter opener aside and pulled the plank up. It was heavy. Underneath, nestled in the dark, spiderweb-filled space between the floor joists, was a black metal box. It was an old military-style ammo box, heavy and cold to the touch, and it was locked with a small, sturdy brass padlock. My heart was hammering so hard I felt dizzy. A key. Where would he hide a key, pirates? I whispered. Where do pirates hide keys? My eyes flew back to the desk. It was just a desk. An old, solid, unremarkable piece of furniture. But I remembered something else. Another one of his little tricks to amuse me. I went to the side of the desk. The one facing the wall. It looked solid. Just decorative molding around the edge. But I remembered him pressing one of the wooden rosettes. I found it and pushed. Hard. A small, wooden click echoed in the silent room. And a tiny, secret drawer, no bigger than a deck of cards, sprang open from the side. I had completely forgotten about it. Inside, resting on a bed of faded red velvet, was a single, small brass key. My hands were shaking so violently that it took me 3 tries to get the key into the padlock. It turned with a satisfying, oily thunk. I took a deep breath, as if I were about to dive underwater. I lifted the heavy lid. The smell of old paper, ink, and something dry and metallic filled my nose. On top, there was a simple, black, hardcover ledger. It was the same kind he used to track the daily sales. I opened it. His handwriting, beautifully neat and strong, filled the first page. But this wasn't a list of bread and pastry sales. The first entry was dated July 14th. 1998. Loan to B and M. Car repair after Leo's accident, $1. Wu-bai. Verbal promise to repay by September. I turned the page. And again. And again. My blood ran cold as I read. March 3rd. 2001. Loan to Mark. Surefire business investment, $5. Ling ling ling. Promised repay in 6 months. December 10th. 2004. Loan to Brenda. Pay off credit card debt, $7. Liambei. She was crying. June 22. 2008. Loan for Leo's first new car. 10 yuan. Ling ling ling. They said he deserved a fresh start. August 5th. 2011. Loan to B&M. Down payment on their house, $25. Ling ling ling. On and on it went. A meticulous, heartbreaking record of their greed. He had noted every single dollar, every loan, every broken promise. I flipped to the last page. An entry from just 6 months ago loaned to Mark, covering Leo's debts, $8. Ling ling ling. Below it, Arthur had drawn a sharp left. Double line. He had tallied the total in bright red ink. His handwriting a little shakier than in the beginning, but still firm. The final number stared up at me, $154. Baba Arsher. Ling ling. Beneath the ledger was a thick bundle of papers tied with simple kitchen twine. I recognized Brenda's dramatic, looping cursive on the top letter. Dearest Arthur. It read, Thank you. Thank you. You've saved us. We will pay you back every single penny. I swear it. It was dated 2004. There were dozens more. Letters from Mark. Appreciate the help. Arthur. You'll get it all back. Plus interest. They were receipts. They were admissions of guilt. My hands were numb. Underneath the letters was one more document. It was thick, folded, and bound in a formal blue cover from Mr. Tateman the Centavry, Harrison's law firm. I read the title on the front: Termination of Inheritance Rights and Final Settlement Agreement. I felt a roaring in my ears. I unfolded the document. It was dense legal text, but my eyes found the key phrases almost instantly. In consideration of the sum of $75,000, $75. Ling ling ling. Ling. Receipt of which is hereby acknowledged. We, Brenda and Mark, last name, do fully, finally, and irrevocably terminate, waive, and relinquish all present and future rights of inheritance, claim, or interest, of any kind whatsoever, to the estate of Arthur last name, including but not limited to the property and business known as Arthur's Pantry. It was signed by both of them. It was dated October 17th, 2015, 10 years ago, and it was stamped with a notary's public seal, big and embossed. They had taken $75,000 in cash. They had sold their rights to this place. To me, to him, 10 years ago. They had no legal claim to any of it. Not a single crumb. The signature card at the bank. He added them after this. My mind reeled. He knew. He knew what they were. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a trap. At the very bottom of the box, there was one last thing. A single, sealed envelope. The same cream-colored stationery he used for birthday cards. My name was written on the front in his familiar hand, for my Clara Bean. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. My dearest girl, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I am so very sorry to have left you. But it also means that your aunt and uncle are behaving exactly as I always knew they would. Do not be sad. Clara, be strong. This box is your shield, and I have spent years building it for you. 10 years ago, they came to me in terrible trouble. Leo. As usual, they needed a large amount of money. I gave it to them, but on one final condition. They had to sign away any future right to this bakery. I would not have them circling you like vultures when I was gone, trying to steal the life you and I built together. They took the money. Clara. They signed the paper. Mr. Harrison has the original copy safe in his vault. The signature card at the bank, I did that 5 years later. I knew their greed would never be satisfied. I knew they would see it as a weakness, as an opportunity. I gave them just enough rope. Clara Bean. I knew that one day they would try to pull on it, and when they did, they would find the noose was for them. They have no rights to this business. They are co-signers on an account for a property to which they have absolutely no legal claim. By trying to force money from you, they are committing fraud. I am so sorry I had to leave you with this one last fight, but I know you can win it. You have my strength in you. You have my love. Now, go and protect what is yours. Your loving grandfather. I clutched the letter to my chest. I wasn't crying. Not really. A hot tear of such profound love and relief slid down my cheek. But I was not sad. I was not grieving. I was seen. He had seen it all. He had known. All those years. Every time I'd felt the sting of their unfairness. And he had quietly, patiently, built me a fortress. He was still here. He was still protecting me. I stood up, my legs strong and steady beneath me. I carefully, methodically, placed the ledger, the bundle of letters, and the notarized agreement into my work satchel. I folded his letter and put it in my pocket, over my heart. I picked up my phone. My fingers were steady as I dialed Mr. Harrison's number. Mr. Harrison, it's Clara, I said, my voice clear and cold as steel. You were right. He was no fool. I have everything. I have the ledger. I have the letters. And I have a notarized termination of rights agreement from 2015. I'm coming to your office. Right now. As I was locking the study door behind me, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Uncle Mark. I stopped on the landing to read it. Clock is ticking. Clara. 9 a.m. Tomorrow. We're picking up the check at 9:05. Don't be stupid. I looked at the text message, then at the heavy satchel in my other hand. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. A smile that felt foreign on my face. Oh, Uncle Mark, I whispered to the empty hallway. You have no idea who's being stupid. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. The next morning, the day of their deadline. Mr. Harrison had insisted on his conference room. These matters are best handled on neutral ground. With a witness, he'd said, a cold edge in his voice. I spent the night in my own apartment, above the bakery. For the first time in my life, I slept deeply, with Arthur's letter under my pillow. I woke before dawn, not from panic, but from purpose. I went downstairs and, in the quiet, cool morning air, I began to bake. I baked the sourdough Arthur had taught me to love, my hands moving with a familiar, steady rhythm. I was not a victim. I was a baker. I was Arthur's girl. When I walked into Mr. Harrison's office at 9:50 a.m., the conference room was already prepared. He had a carafe of coffee, a legal pad, and 2 stacks of documents. One was the file I had brought him. The other, he explained, was his own. The originals, he'd said with a grim smile. Always keep the originals safe. At 10 o'clock on the dot, the door opened. Mark strode in first, wearing his best suit, as if he were closing a business deal. He looked confident, almost cheerful. Brenda followed, dabbing at her face with her handkerchief, a mask of practiced sorrow firmly in place. And trailing behind them, looking bored and annoyed, was Leo. He was staring at his phone, his hair messy, like he'd just rolled out of bed. Clara, dear, Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'm so glad you decided to be reasonable. It's for the best. You'll see. Mark just nodded at me, then at Mr. Harrison. Let's get this over with, he said, pulling out a chair. We've got an appointment at the bank. Leo, he snapped. Put that stupid phone away. Show some respect. Leo sighed, pocketed his phone, and slumped into a chair, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Good morning, Mr. Harrison said, his voice polite but cold as ice. Thank you all for coming. Miss Clara has asked me to preside over this meeting, as she has decided not to sign your loan application. The air in the room changed instantly. Mark's smile vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. What is this? A game we told you what happens. You've got 5 minutes to change your mind, girl, or we walk out of here and freeze your life. Brenda's fake tears turned to real frustration. Clara, after all we've done for you, we raised you. How can you be so ungrateful? I said nothing. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly on the table in front of me. I looked at Brenda, then at Mark, and I let the silence stretch. I watched the confidence drain from their faces, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. We are not here to discuss the loan. We are here to discuss a matter of significant fraud. Fraud, Mark scoffed, slamming his hand on the table, making Leo jump. What are you talking about? We are on that bank account. Fair and square. Your old boss Arthur put us there himself. That's not fraud. That's a fact. You are correct, Mr. Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. You are on the bank account. But we have a small issue. You see, in order to defraud someone, You must first misrepresent your legal standing and financial interest, which is exactly what you did. He slid a document across the polished wood table. It was the original, 10-year-old termination of inheritance rights and final settlement agreement, still in its blue legal cover. "Do you recognize your signatures, mister?" Harrison asked. Brenda and Mark both leaned forward. I watched their faces. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Mark's face went from red to a pasty. Sick, white. Brenda let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Leo, for the first time, sat up straight, looking from the document to his parents. "This," Mark stammered, his voice suddenly a hoarse whisper. This is old. This doesn't mean anything. This was just a family arrangement. It is a notarized, legally binding contract." "Mr. Harrison countered, his voice sharp as a knife. "It states that in exchange for $75,000, which you received and acknowledged, you terminated all rights to Arthur's estate. That includes the business. You have absolutely no legal claim to Arthur's pantry. Not 1 cent. Not 1 brick. You sold your right to it 10 years ago. But... Brenda was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with panic. "The bank account Arthur put us on the account, he did it after that. That must mean he changed his mind." "It means," I said, my voice cutting through her whine, "that he knew you. He knew you were greedy, and he knew you would never change. And now, Mr. Harrison continued, picking up the next item, "we come to the loan you were demanding." He opened the black ledger and spun it around for them to see. My client's grandfather kept meticulous records. This ledger details every single dollar he loaned you over the past 25 years. Carte père, investments, credit card debts, house, down payments, and, of course, covering Leo's endless troubles. The total, as of 6 months ago, is $154,820. Leo's head snapped toward his parents. $150,000, what you told me. Grandpa just helped out sometimes. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. He just stared at the page, at his own name, written over and over. And finally, "Mr. Harrison said, we have your own letters. Dozens of them. All admitting these debts. All promising to repay." He untied the kitchen twine and fanned the letters out on the table. Brenda's flowery handwriting. Mark's sharp, impatient script. Promises to pay every penny. "I believe you wrote, Mrs. Last name. Pledges to pay plus interest." Brenda let out a wail and buried her face in her hands. Mark was silent, his jaw working, his eyes darting from the papers to the door, like a cornered animal. "So, you see, Mr. Harrison said, leaning back in his chair, "you have a very big problem. You came here this morning to extort $50,000 from my client, leveraging a bank account to which you have no legal or financial claim. That is fraud, a criminal offense. Separately, you have an outstanding, well-documented, and admitted personal debt to Arthur's estate which my client now controls for over $150,000. He steepled his fingers, just as he had in our first meeting. "So, this is what is going to happen. You have 2 choices, and you will make one. Right here, right now. Choice 1. We call this a very bad day. You will sign this document." He produced a new, single-page paper which immediately removes your names from all business accounts associated with Arthur's pantry. You will also sign a formal acknowledgement of the 2015 termination agreement. In exchange, my client, in an act of profound generosity that you do not deserve, will agree not to pursue the $154,000 personal debt. You will walk out of this office. You will never contact my client again, and you will never, ever set foot in her bakery. He leaned forward. Or, choice 2, you refuse, and I will, within the hour, file a civil suit for the full $154,000, plus interest. And then, I will walk across the street to the district attorney's office with this entire file, the ledger, the letters, the 2015 agreement, and your recent threats, and I will file a criminal complaint for felony fraud and extortion. You will lose this business, and you will very likely lose your liberty. What is it to be? Mark didn't hesitate. He was a bully, but he was also a coward. Give me the pen, he snarled, his voice a gravelly whisper. He snatched the paper and signed his name, his hand shaking with rage. He didn't even read it. He threw the pen across the table at Brenda. Sign it, he hissed. Brenda, sobbing uncontrollably, signed the paper, her signature a messy, tear-stained scrawl. They stood up. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at their son. He was always a cruel old man. Brenda wept as Mark grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. He always loved you more. He didn't love me more, Aunt Brenda, I said, finding my voice at last. It was steady. It was clear. He just knew you better. They froze at the door, her words hanging in the air. Mark yanked the door open, and they were gone. Leo was still sitting at the table. He was pale, staring at the ledger, at the long list of his own failures paid for by his grandfather's kindness and his parents' greed. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and, for the first time, clear. The gambling debt, he said, his voice quiet. Is it true? Was it 50,000? I nodded. It was. He swallowed hard. They sold their rights to this place. For me, 10 years ago. And they were still trying to take it from you. It wasn't a question. It was a realization, and it seemed to shatter him. Yes, I said. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair in. He looked at me, not as the golden child, but just as a young man seeing the truth. I'm sorry, Clara, for all of it, for my part. He turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving me alone with Mr. Towler. Harrison, I sat back. The tension of the last few days, the last 25 years, flowing out of me, leaving me feeling light. I looked at Mr. Harrison. He was smiling, a real, warm smile. He would be so proud of you. My dear, he said gently, so very proud. That afternoon, I stood behind the counter of my bakery. The sun was streaming through the front windows, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of fresh bread was my comfort again. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up, a real smile on my face, ready for my next customer. I felt Arthur's presence, not as a sad memory, but as a warm, strong hand on my shoulder. He had left me his legacy, but he had also left me a far greater gift. He had left me my freedom. This whole journey taught me that family isn't always the people you are born to. Sometimes, true family are the people who protect you, who see your worth, and who build a shield to keep you safe, even after they're gone. And it taught me that the most important things in life are always worth fighting for. If you're watching this, and if you've ever felt trapped by a family situation that just feels wrong, if you've ever been made to feel small so someone else can feel big, please know that you are not alone, and you are not powerless. What are the hidden boxes in your own life? What truths have you been afraid to look for? Share your own stories of strength and discovery in the comments below. We can learn from each other. And if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to just keep baking, and to trust the people who truly loved you.